You have no idea how excited I was for WholeCake Island. Before starting One Piece, 3 things got spoiled for me: Gear 5, Ace's death, and Sanji having his own arc. As someone who had Sanji as his favorite Straw Hat, I could not have been more excited. Even when Sanji's character started getting worse over time, I overlooked it, thinking things will get better. When Sanji started aggressively simping over every single girl, I forgave it. When Sanji wanted to buy a slave on Sabudi, I overlooked it. When Sanji got jealous of Absalom for having the ability to pervert around women, I averted my eyes. When he unironically almost died from nose bleeding using a gag to start a whole plot point, I almost gave up, but I still had hope. Just wait for WholeCake Island, I said. Just wait a bit more. Well, I did. I finally finished WholeCake, and as much as it pains me to say, the wait was not worth it. Despite the numerous, and I mean numerous, problems I have with this arc, I could not have anticipated how disappointed I would be with Sanji, who, despite supposedly having the spotlight on him for 70 chapters, even more if we count Zou, he leaves the arc not only worse. Oda, in his attempt to make him more likable, completely ruins, shits on, and contradicts not only thematics inside the arc itself, but thematics we explored previously, unintentionally hurting Luffy, Nami, and Pudding, catching them all in the crossfire. Let's go one by one as the events of the arc unfold. And funnily enough, the first thing is actually the most problematic: Sanji versus Luffy. Before I comment on this duo, I want to remind you of an earlier scene in the story, not too dissimilar to this one. Usopp versus Luffy. 2 friends made enemies, not even enemies, just opposing each other over their ideals, none truly in the wrong, both having understandable reasoning for why they are fighting for what they believe in. However, besides simply ideals, there is an underlying thematic in this fight. The captain's word is final, and objection, rebuttal, and downright opposition will not be tolerated. Luffy had to learn that lesson in order for him to start developing into a proper captain. Yes, he loves his crew, and I might headcanon this, but I believe he truly views Usopp as his best friend in the crew, considering how they are always depicted to be the ones goofing off together. However, despite that, he still is the captain. He must act like one. Zoro specifically told him that if he does not see Luffy as a worthy captain, if he believes that his word doesn't hold any weight when it comes to the crew, he will be the first one to leave. Zoro is his most loyal dog, however, a dog without a leash. He isn't here because he must, he is here because he believes in Luffy as a captain, and if said belief is shaken, he will leave immediately. Usopp versus Luffy isn't just a duel between friends who had an argument, isn't simply 2 men having opposing ideals. It is a duel of a crewmate going beyond his place, attacking and rejecting his captain's wishes, and refusing to stand where he is supposed to be. It is hard for both of them. They truly love each other. Zoro, despite being the harshest, still wanted Usopp to come back, to have learned his lesson, to apologize and beg to be allowed back. And that's what he did. Luffy set sail without Usopp. It hurt him. He didn't wish to, but he had to. Because even if they are friends, even if they love each other, he still is at the top of the pyramid. Or at least should be. And if Usopp wants to be back after disrespecting him, then he should beg for it. And he did. Back to Sanji versus Luffy. In contrast to Usopp, who simply opposed Luffy's wishes to abandon the Merry and fighting him, not even seriously in fact, Sanji, on the other hand, completely shits on Luffy. He verbally disrespects him and his dream. Again, in front of everyone, disrespects him and his dream. After which, he goes out, continuously kicks the shit out of Luffy, leaves him injured and goes away, whilst seeing an army going Luffy's way and not even for a second attempting to turn back and help him. Now, you would think after such disrespect, after having Nami begging him to stop and saying they will leave, after Sanji full well knowing Luffy will stand his ground and will wait for him, after knowing that his captain is incredibly injured not only due to Sanji's attacks, but him traveling through Tote Island in general leaves him to fend for himself, you would think Sanji would have to cut his stomach open to apologize to be let back. Obviously, not to that extreme, it's still One Piece after all. However, just as Usopp did, he needs to grovel and beg to be let back on the Sunny. After all, that is what Water 7 was all about, right? The dynamic between the captain and his crew. Well, the begging never happened. He didn't beg, he didn't plead, he didn't even apologize. All it took was one basket of food, dropped food mind you, given to an almost fully starved Luffy for all to be forgiven. Sanji had his reasons, but so did Usopp. One of these characters was put through the grinder and forced to learn a lesson, whilst the other didn't even get a slap on the wrist. This not only made the confrontation lose any and all drama, considering how Sanji walked away scot-free, Nami, who acted as Zoro's replacement, saying how she would never forgive him, and then forgave him immediately after a gag panel, and Luffy suffered the most here, because this was an active regression of all the lessons he learned in Water 7. He didn't act as a captain. He let Sanji walk all over him without any repercussion. If Zoro was in WholeCake Island instead of Nami and saw this duel, Zoro would not be currently with us on the Straw Hats, if his character stayed consistent, of course. It was a mockery to his title as a captain and a complete disregard to what happened earlier in the story. Moving on, Sanji being named a failure in the eyes of Judge cannot continue further than the first 20-ish chapters, considering how Sanji, off-screen mind you, defeated Yonji and stood toe-to-toe for quite a while fighting against Judge. His ideology cannot stand when physical proof has been shown to you and even you, the person continuously naming him a failure, compliments him on his abilities. Mind you, Sanji was fighting him without a suit and without the exoskeleton upgrades. If he manages to beat Yonju and is keeping up with Judge, the idea of him being a failure is unbelievable and unacceptable. Sanji's romance with Pudding admittedly had a really good start, a very well written, credit where it's due, bittersweet ending, and could have hit so much harder if the sections between the marriage assassination failing and Pudding wiping his memory had deeper dialogue that wasn't simply gags. Starting before that though, the panel of Sanji looking at Pudding's third eye should be, and honestly hoped it would have been, more explored, because that was the very first time, and I do mean very first time, in Sanji's journey thus far where he looked at a woman not as a pervert nor as this chivalrous gentleman, but with actual adoration, bewilderment and attraction. It is the first woman that has made Sanji truly enamored, with a face that depicts love instead of lust. Yet right after that, you would not believe that was the case. Him having this panel means almost nothing. It means just as much as Sanji having hard eyes and screaming, "Nami's one! Marry me!" Because it goes nowhere, and that is saddening, because that could have been the start of the two of them falling actually in love, and the ending being that much more heartbreaking. Instead, what we got is Pudding no longer being a character, but a gag where most of her dialogue is centered around her double-facedness, where she would say something mean, tsundere-like, only to either end it with a "Oh my god, what am I saying? I didn't mean that!" or something like "I hope you and your friends don't make it alive, dear." Beyond that, her other aspect is to have hard eyes, foam coming out of her mouth, and fainting whenever Sanji does or says something cool. Oppositely of that, Sanji almost completely ignores her existence, staying silent around her or having a perverted single panel of a reaction when he sees her in a new outfit. Sanji has more dialogue after his failed marriage with Chiffon than the girl he seemingly truly fell in love with. Pudding and Sanji had the possibility of having the greatest, in my opinion obviously, character dynamic and character storyline in the entire series. The beginning portion till the middle climax and the very ending is some of the best writing Oda has done between two characters. However, he completely shot the bed when it truly mattered, when he actually had the opportunity to deepen the relationship of these two tragic people, who both faced judgment for how they were born ever since they were children, who had to face punishment for simply being born. These two souls found one another, found solace in one another, and tragically had to give away the one person that made them feel seen and loved. How much better and tragic would it have been if in the final stretch, instead of gags, instead of staying silent and talking to somebody else for 90% of the time, they actually got the chance to deepen their relationship. No forced marriages, no parents using them as political tools, no masks, just two people actually truly loving one another and having that love be taken away from them. But that's not what we got. Instead, we are left with a beautiful bond going nowhere. A princess character that for the first time since Vivi felt like an actual character be reduced to a gag. Sanji's awful normal gag no less, and an expression from Sanji, a truly rare expression that went nowhere and will probably never be mentioned again. Continuing back to Sanji, this character gets completely undermined both physically and intellectually. I already talked about him physically besting or being on similar levels as Yeonju and Judge without any enhancements, yet the idea of Judge ever being wrong about his methods never comes up. Sanji remains the quote-unquote failure of the family despite what has been shown so far. Outside of that, we see Sanji managing to achieve speeds so high he manages to dodge Katakuri's bean attack and be so incredibly fast nobody could notice him move when attacking Oven. Yet not even 10 chapters later, he gets noticed by some dumb fuck fodder minion when trying to rescue Luffy, which does not in any particular way make any sense if we take the previous two scenes alongside him learning airwalk that were more than likely made as a setup for this scene exactly. You cannot tell me and show me that Sanji was moving faster than anyone could see and then get disproven by some no-name useless bomb fodder. If it was Katakuri, Big Mom, hell, even Oven himself, I would kinda at least be able to make an argument. Some bum-ass Firefly should not be in the conversation. And to top it all off, he gets ridiculed by Niji, who tells him, if you're as slow as you are, you won't be able to escape anywhere, which is hilarious. If I am to be a pessimist, his failure to escape unnoticed was a last bit of humiliation Oda wanted to enact upon Sanji, because that would be the third or fourth time Sanji failed his mission in this arc. Sanji failed to warn his crewmates about Germa and Big Mom, despite having numerous opportunities to do so. Sanji, for some godforsaken reason, truly believed that Big Mom would let the Straw Hats leave the island scot-free if he just went along with the wedding. Either this guy has major amnesia we have not been told about, or he's majorly retarded, but he was there when Luffy threatened her. He knows that Big Mom is an emperor, a strong-ass, crazy-ass bitch. Trusting on anything she says should be moronic, should be the last thing that happens. Should only be the case if the character asking that favor was Usopp, Chopper, or hell, even Luffy himself. But Sanji is supposed to be the strategical one, the guy that actually has some brain inside of his head. At least, that was the case for the majority of the time Sanji has been on the screen. Yet this strategist not only made a deal with an emperor where there were no inherent negative sides outside of the one he already knew of, this dumbass believed her. Then after the fact, this dumbass's whole genius plan where he would rescue his beloved captain is to simply wait for him to exit the mirror world surrounded by Big Mom pirates and just go and grab him. This moron decided that baking a cake for Big Mom would be enough to not only stop her but also persuade her into forgetting everything and going about her day. For me to believe that such a thought would even enter Sanji's head, I would have to forget everything that has been shown so far and pretend that he is a newly introduced character. The fact that he even baked said cake is a spit on the declaration that he would not dare cook for anyone that isn't his crewmate, which also is a spit on his initial characterization of cooking for anyone, no matter who they are, because all people deserve to be fed. So which one is it, Oda? Is Sanji willing to cook for anyone and everyone, no matter who? Or is he fully loyal to the Straw Hats and will not use his abilities on anyone but them? You cannot have your cake and eat it as well. And speaking of the cake, it is ironically the cherry on top of the cake when it comes to Sanji achieving absolutely nothing. We spent so much time on the creation of the cake. We were shown, twice mind you, how Sanji is so confident that this cake would blow Big Mom's mind away. We had a whole juxtaposition of Sanji and Luffy being determined to finish their task due to their friends believing in them. And mind you, Luffy is currently fighting his most difficult opponent yet. This cake was made into a ginormous deal only to achieve the exact opposite effect. Yes, Big Mom had an orgasm when eating it, but that was followed by her returning her strength and continuing her pursuit of the Straw Hats, now more dangerous than ever before. Thank God the fishmen decided to pop out again to bail us out from the 50th death scene in this arc. And even with that, the idea of a cake stopping Big Mom has to be one of the most idiotic, moronic things this entire manga has done. After having her nation destroyed, her wedding ruined, her wedding cake taken away from her, being forced to go through her longest hunger fangs yet, Luffy spitting in her face on multiple occasions, either directly or indirectly, after Zeus was stolen from her, after multiple of her children being defeated, after Germa helped in the Straw Hats escape, after her plan for power gets torn to bits. Why would she ever stop pursuing the Straw Hats? If the Straw Hats escape, nothing is stopping her from just killing Germa altogether, meaning Sanji failed to save them. After that, goes straight to East Blue and sinks the Paratie, or worse, forces Zeff inside one of her books. Hell, with Jinpei's disrespect, who is stopping her from going to Fishman Island and destroying it? The idea that after everything that has been done to her, she would just forgive and forget after one cake really asks a lot out of me as a reader. And to finish it off, the grand theme of this arc is nature versus nurture. And of course, it's the kind nature of Sanji himself. Oda truly wanted to show Sanji as being the kindest person out there, and you have no idea how much I wish that idea could have happened, yet is genuinely impossible when you take everything he has done before and during WholeCake Island. You cannot depict a character as the kindest of them all when said character has fantasized about being invisible and spying on women, asked whether they should buy a slave, told Jinbei to kill himself, beating Luffy, an opponent that didn't even move with his strongest attack, and a couple other more whilst Nami was begging him to stop. He didn't even attempt to do anything when right after he beat the shit out of Luffy and saw an army of hundreds go their way. You cannot depict a character who will be always willing to defend women and has been doing so for all of the series runtime this far, yet start questioning himself when he had to protect Chiffon, a conventionally unattractive woman. If Chiffon looked like Vivi, Nami, Viola, Rebecca, or whoever, I have no doubt in my mind he would have jumped immediately. Disguises be damned. Yet, he didn't. You cannot be the kindest if you, not even for a second, felt remorse or even apologetic for what you did against your captain and against your friend. Let me repeat, he didn't even think of the duel after it happened. He just wanted to go back to his friends, and just because out of nowhere you decide that you want to save your family despite everything they did to you, that still didn't depict the type of kindness Oda wanted to depict. He had the perfect opportunity, as cliche as it would have been, when asked by Judge why he came back to save them. The most simplest and fitting response would have been something along the lines of, "It was the right thing to do. I just couldn't stand and watch you all die." Instead, what we got is baby Sanji having a temper tantrum and saying that he only did it because he wanted to be a man Zeff could be proud of, a man his real daddy could be proud of. This scene that should have, unironically, been a culmination of Sanji and Judge's arc feels more as a showcase of how much better Zeff is. which is cool. I like Zev, he is a goat, but he is currently not the important one here. This should have been Sanji's shining moment, and the moment where Judge realizes that maybe his methods weren't as perfect as they thought they were. And not even to mention how, despite his friends being attacked by Big Mom's crew and her generals, Sanji still stays on the fucking table without even thinking to help. But no. So close, yet so far, as it has been the majority of this arc. And just because Oda was feeling humorous, I guess, the arc ends with Sanji receiving the Germa costume, which he will definitely use. No reason to show it or give it to him otherwise. He didn't prove himself as worthy, as someone who didn't need the enhancements and the suit to be just as, if not better than his siblings. In the end, Sanji was, is, and more than likely will forever be the Windsmoke failure. I came into this arc expecting the most. I truly was excited for it. I gritted my teeth through some of the most boring bullshit, namely Tree Bark and Fishman Island, all for the chance to see my favorite character receive the love he so desperately deserved and needed. And even despite the problems I have with WholeCake Island, of which there are many, I still quietly begged that Sanji would have a satisfying arc. And although Oda had good intentions and I can see what he was going for, the arc left Sanji a miserable, humiliated pile of shit that failed at everything he set out to do and came out worse than what he was previously. A character that entered the arc as a kind-hearted man, the left hand of the Straw Hats, the one who fights on equal footing with Zoro, the man who has stood against the world government with no fear and hesitation, just so he could save a crewmate they met not even a month ago, to a man that when push came to shove, failed in everything they tried, had to be rescued by the same siblings he so desperately tried to prove wrong, fell in love with Pudding, only to ignore said woman for the entire time they were together, and in his desire to save his crew, only put them in even bigger danger, forcing Jinbei to stow Big Mom out, so even at the end, Jinbei did more than Sanji ever could. Sanji entered WholeCake Island as a man worthy of being on the next Pirate King ship and left as nothing but a failure. And that saddens me.